Hi, welcome this evening. We apologize for the delay, but we just had a few technical difficulties that we had to sort through. My name's Kathleen D'Amico, and I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Lounsbury, and we are thrilled to have Kyle Ferreira joining us tonight. Kyle is the co-owner of Bar Sazerac and Saltlick Smokehouse, along with his wife, Jennifer. And speaking of Jennifer, unfortunately, she's unable to join us this evening, but that is due to the early arrival of their second child. So congratulations, Jennifer and Kyle. I know that Kyle has a lot of great tips to share with us tonight, so I'm just going to say a few brief words, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff with Kyle. If you have a pen and paper handy, you can take some notes, but we wanted to let you know that we will be recording tonight's session, and we will be sending that out following the webinar, along with some ingredients that Kyle's going to be using tonight. So Bar Sazerac specializes in craft cocktails and snacks. It was established in 2016 and is located on Hamilton's trendy James Street North. And I read that it is named after a classic New Orleans cocktail. Is that correct, Kyle?
It is correct.
Awesome. And if you've ever visited the bar, you will no doubt have noticed the amazing artwork on the wall. And that featured artist is Kyle's own brother, Kareem, who received his Bachelor in Fine Arts from McMaster. Jessica is going to be posting a link to the restaurant's website in the chat so you can explore more of their offerings along with some other useful links for this evening. And while you're watching the webinar, please submit your questions for Kyle, and we'll get to as many as possible following Kyle's demonstration. So now, without any further delay, let's get started. Over to you, Kyle.
Hello, my name's Kyle Ferreira, and I'm from Bar Sazerac, as they mentioned. I happen to be a pretty good bartender, depending on who you ask. The joke I usually tell at this point in time is that the only people who really care that I came in 4th in Canada are the people who came in 5th through 10th. But let's talk about making cocktails. So my wife sent me a list of things that she had originally sent to talk about this evening. We're going to talk about summer cocktails, things that we can sip in our backyard when it's so beautiful outside. What is necessary equipment, and what is kind of things that are a little bit more specialized and are good for professional bartenders, but not necessary for you. We're also going to talk about what is necessary for your home bar and what will kind of make your drinks look a little bit nicer and impress your guests. All right. So first thing first, we're going to talk about the 2 types of cocktails I really like to make. One would fall under the build called old fashioned, and one will fall under the build called the sour. All right. So, does know anything about liquor, or at the very least have personal preferences about liquor? Please feel free to put up your hand and just ask the question or answer the question. Sorry.
Yeah, if you have any favorite liquors, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A box, and I will just come on and read them to Kyle.
Yes, I like the liquor. Yes, that is
yes, that is good.
right, cool. So I would like to say that if we're going to talk about summer cocktails, we're going to be talking about the same things that we'd be talking about when we're talking about summer food or summer culinary endeavors. So when we talk about summer food, spring or summer food, we're looking for lighter flavors, brighter flavors, vibrant flavors, and things that are not particularly heavy on the stomach, and that you can enjoy and sip or eat throughout the entire evening. All right, so we're going to talk about a subset of my favorite variety, which is the fizz. Okay, so there are two basic categories of cocktails, if you will. One is cocktails that will have some sort of citrus element. Those would be called sours. And then there's ones that will be primarily liquor, and those ones are ones that we're going to term old fashions, right? So the one that's going to come up more often for us during the summer is the sour. Okay. The basic version of that is if we take 2 ounces of liquor, all right, or thereabouts, 1 ounce of some sort of citrus or acidulant or thereabouts, and 1 ounce of something sweet or thereabouts. The reason that that I have said thereabouts every single time we talked about the liquor, the acidulant, or the sweetener is that it must come down to personal preference, or at the very least, who it is that you're making the cocktail for. All right, if you were to come into our bar every single time, it would be a conversation with your bartender about what is that you like, what it is that you don't like, and how they'd be able to present that to you intelligently. Okay, so let's start with a nice, easy cocktail. Probably one of my absolute favorites going on this summer. All right. We have lemon juice, a little bit of the pomegranate mint syrup. And for this one, we're going to be using something that I consider to be very easy and not particularly polarizing, vodka. The vodka that we're going to be using today is Northern Keep. This one is actually from Alberta, and they're using rye and winter wheat. Those things are going to give us some really nice flavors. We tend to forget that even though vodka tends to distill out most of the flavors, we maintain the innate flavor of the grain that was used to distill it. So a thing that I want you guys to do on your own time, take a bottle of something that is made entirely of rye, so like Sobieski vodka, which is a lovely Polish vodka. It's made entirely of rye. You can get this on almost any LCBO. All right, take a small amount of that and then drink it, and then think about that flavor, and then move on to something like CC 100% rye. What you're going to see is the flavor of the rye translate through from something that has no additional flavor to something that would have additional flavor from the barrel and the aging process. Okay, so we're gonna take 2 ounces of our vodka. All right. 1 and 2 and 2 and there we go. So 2 ounces of our vodka. We're going to be putting in 1 ounce of our lemon juice. All right. And then 1 ounce of our pomegranate mint syrup. For our syrups, generally speaking, when we make a syrup at Bar Sazerac, it's almost always going to be the item in question, some water and some sugar. You might find that to be kind of obvious, direct, almost prosaic, but the truth of the matter is you'll find that when you are direct and when you are obvious in the things that you're making, almost always it will taste better. Almost always it will be a substantially better product for your guests. For this particular syrup, we're in actual fact going to be using 500 grams of sugar, 500 grams of water, the seeds and pulp from 3 pomegranates, and then 3 sprigs of mint. All right, what we're going to do is we're going to mash our pomegranate with our sugar. We're going to add in our mint. We're going to mash that with the sugar and pomegranate.
And quick question, Kyle, does it matter if you use brown, cane, or other varieties of sugar, such as agave syrup?
Oh man. My wife told me to not talk too much because the way that I'd normally answer that question is discuss sugar as a singular item, because I am a pastry chef and I love sugar in all forms, and to talk about it and wax poetic about it. But the short answer is absolutely yes. You can use other sugars to make it have a specific flavor, or to deal with your own dietary restrictions. For example, my wife was before her pregnancy doing the keto diet, and she was using the monk fruit sweetener, the erythritol. We found out that it's not a classic 1-to-1 ratio of water to sweetener. It ends up being 1 water to 0.75 of the sweetener. That's how our bodies kind of deal with that particular sugar. We for whatever reason think it's sweeter than classic sugar. But for this particular recipe that we're talking about, I just want you guys to use white sugar, because you're not the of the oeuvre. The the pomegranate and the mint are the ones that are really trying to shine through. The sugar's just there to be kind of a non-obtrusive sweetener element. All right, cool. So to finish that recipe, you would mash your pomegranate and mint with your sugar. Sugar being hydroscopic is going to pull a lot of the water and all the flavor out of the mint and the pomegranate. After that, you would add in your water, bring it to the boil, and immediately turn it off. What that'll do is you're going to be able to draw out as much flavor as possible without destroying the kind of more volatile side of the syrup. If you wanted to do it 100% the way that we normally do it at the bar, you could honestly put all of those mashed elements inside of a Ziploc bag, a Ziploc freezer bag, and gently simmer it below the boil for about half an hour. And then chill it while it's still sealed, and all of those flavors will remain inside the bag, and you're actually going to have a much more pronounced mint flavor. To answer your question, generally speaking, the syrups, if properly maintained inside of the fridge, you have about a 2-week shelf life. We use at the bar a wonderful preservative agent, potassium sorbate. That's if you look in almost every juice that exists, that's probably the preservative agent in that juice. All right, and that's how we kind of get around that. But for the most part, our syrups don't last that long, so it's more just kind of me adding an additional insurance policy to a thing that doesn't really need it. All right, so let's ice up. All right, I'm going to be using a Boston shaker. However, I'm going to be doing it in a manner that you can do at home anytime that you want. And we're going to be using a technique called the roll. So if I were to seal it and kind of do this, this would be the classic shaker setup. However, for you guys at home, this is kind of how I would MacGyver it, regardless of whether or not I had a shaker with me. I would pass it. I would put the ice in the glass. 2 glasses. It could be any, like 2 water glasses if you wanted. And then I would pass it back and forth between the 2 glasses, probably about 5 or 6 times. What you're going to see here is the cocktail begin to aerate. You're going to see some bubbles form. And what you're going to see there is that the sugar from the syrup and the citrus from the lemon juice is going to start emulsifying. What that's going to do is going to give you a much more silky mouthfeel and a much better cocktail in general. All right. So what I want you guys to do is when you make your cocktail, always taste, because you don't want to, send out a cocktail that you don't know what it tastes like, and your guest is like, oh my God, this is not balanced, or this is not this, or this is not that. You should be sending out cocktails that you understand to be excellent. All right, so let's just put this in the glass and finish up the cocktail. All right, so always fresh ice, because this ice is already been moving. This ice has already been melting. All right, so we're putting that over fresh ice, and we're going to garnish with a little bit of our dried lemon. So we're gonna end it with a cocktail that looks like this. You're gonna notice that there's a slight opaque quality to that, and that comes from our shaking or rolling. And we should know that the cocktail is properly balanced. All right, I will. We should know that the cocktail is properly balanced by the fact that it is incredibly easy to drink. All right. When our cocktail is in balance, no part of it should be sticking out and being kind of uncomfortable. If it is too sour, that would be less delicious. If it was too sweet, that would be less delicious. If it is too alcoholic, it would become something that is difficult to drink. All right, so when our cocktail is in balance, it should be like you should be having trouble slowing yourself down to drink it. All right, so let me answer that question. Somebody asked about the importance of shaking. Generally speaking, we shake cocktails that have some element of acidulant and some element of sweetener. Right, that is to do the same thing we just did, which was to emulsify those two elements. Right, that is also going to lightly dilute by the fact that we're melting the ice, and that is going to round the rough edges of our cocktail and make it much more palatable. The cocktails that will fall into the other category, the old fashions, generally speaking, those are stirred, unless there is some important thematic reason for us to shake it. For example, even though a vodka martini is just vodka, we're shaking it to aerate, we're shaking it to lightly dilute, and we're also shaking it for speed. Inside of a martini, we'll also be putting in an element of vermouth, which is a fortified wine. And when we oxygenate our wines, they become that much more delicious. All right. Does that answer your question, sir? Okay. All right, so that's our first cocktail. All right, if we were to add, let's say, if we were to add, let's say, some soda to this, it would become a fizz. All right, and if we were to remove the alcohol and put in, let's say, an alcohol substitute, there are more than a couple in Canada that are doing some excellent things. Non-alcoholic substitutes are things that replace the volume of alcohol inside of a cocktail, as well as replicate some of the flavor notes and some of the general feeling of alcohol. Right. All of my favorite things when it comes to non-alcoholic spirits are the ones that don't bother replicating the burn of alcohol, but the ones that replicate some of the nicer points of the alcohol in question. In-house at Sazerac, we make a non-alcoholic rum. We use as the base flavor point of that whole pineapple. We add in some citrus notes and some bitterness. We will add in some vanilla because we need to replicate the flavor that we're going to be getting from the barrel. We're going to be adding in some cocoa nibs because I want some dark chocolate flavors, but not too much. And I'll probably also add in 1 or 2 coffee beans to give us that bitterness and that background aroma. And the last thing I'll add in is usually a very overripe banana, and that is to replicate the flavor profile and potent the potent aromas in rum at all, which is that of overripe banana. If you think of any of your favorite Jamaican rums, that nose, that aroma on the nose, is almost always going to be overripe banana and a little bit of petrol. So we have to find other ways to create that. Non-alcoholic spirits that you can easily get from, let's say, the LCBO. They have more than a couple non-alcoholic gins. Fleury out of Quebec does some excellent work. Their non-alcoholic rum was the one that kind of spurred me forth into thinking about making our own non-alcoholic rum. And there is more than a couple people out in the United States really trying to tackle the conundrum that is non-alcoholic bourbon, as that is one of their chief exports. All right, so that cocktail can easily be switched from vodka to tequila to gin, most definitely. Probably not rum, probably not bourbon, but really and truly, that kind of build is one that I guarantee you you're going to find very advantageous. If we were not to use pomegranate, or we were going to use raspberries, we're going to use blackberries, we're going to use whatever it is that we like, we're probably going to end up with a pretty decent cocktail. Yes, to make it a fizz, we would add some soda. I would also suggest that if you're going to make a fizz, probably don't roll it nearly as much, because you're going to be adding in the soda water, and that's going to act as a dilution factor, not the act of shaking. All right, cool. So if for the equipment that I would suggest for you to have as a home bar person, I would start off with getting a cocktail shaker, a jigger, which is just a methodology of measuring, and then some sort of strainer. So this one is a Hawthorne strainer. But as I mentioned, all of those things can be implemented. You can be excellent at making cocktails without any of those things. All right. Famously, there was a guy who did the International Symposium of Cocktails, Tales of the Cocktails, and he did not bring a spoon for all of his the cocktails that he was talking about that day. So he used his finger. And from that, somebody actually made a cast of his finger. So you can buy this man's finger and use that as a stir stick if you so choose. So it goes to show you that you're not beholden to anything. You're just kind of, it's really up to you as to what it is that you want to do and how it is that you want to do that. All right. Outside of that, I would actually put much more of my excitement and money into kind of a multiplicity of different alcohols. So if you obviously have one for all the people that would come to your house, but at the same time, everyone at Sazerac has a category that they can talk about ad nauseum if they were required to. For my wife, her categories are Italian Amaro and gin. My categories are Italian Amaro, rum, gin, bourbon, and Scotch. There's a lovely young lady. Hers is tequila, and it just comes down to what it is that excited and makes you happy. All right. So the next one that I really want to discuss for cocktails for the summer is a spritz. All right, so classically there's the Aperol Spritz, but we're going to be making one without Prosecco. That is going to give, you don't have to buy all these things. You could really and truly just have a syrup, a acidulant, your liquor of choice, and then some sort of bitterant or some sort of bitter liquor. So the one that is most often used if in our is Campari. All right, that is one of our absolute favorites. Another one that gets used quite a bit at our bar is Fernet Branca. This one is substantially more bitter and not particularly sweet at all. And the one that comes up quite a bit for other people is Jägermeister. I don't know if anyone would have known that the Jägermeister is a bitter, but it is a German bitter and has fallen into that category for quite some time. Cool. So the cocktail we're actually going to be making is with the Jaeger, because I feel like that's just going to be something that maybe you guys have on hand. I don't know if that was a thing that you guys did when you were younger and possibly in university. I didn't, because I've always been a slightly more boring person. But we're gonna start talking about that. So for our Jaeger cocktail, this is going to follow kind of the same basic idea of a Amaro Spritz. We're going to be using our Jaeger. So we're going to be hitting it with 1 ounce of Jägermeister. All right. We're going to be using 1 ounce of Beefeater gin. All right. One ounce of our lemon juice. All right. And last but not least, 1 ounce of our lemon rosemary syrup. All right, we're gonna give that a quick taste. That's nice. So what we're gonna do there is a lot of herbaceous flavors. It's got a little bit of anise from the Jägermeister. The herbaceous flavors are going to be doubled and tripled down with our lemon rosemary. Yes, sir. Do I have any favorite gins? Oh, at Bar Sazerac, I have at last count 46 different gins. Each one of them offers something different, or is in some way personally exciting. For example, the most exciting thing that happened when I went to a liquor store in New York recently was that I ended up bringing home about six, 7 bottles of the American bottling of Beefeater. In Canada, we get it at 40%. In the United States, they get it at 47%. I gushed. I lost it. I could not believe it when I walked into the duty free right before we left, and the young lady behind the counter was kind of like, why are you excited about gin? Why are you excited about Beefeater when you could be buying, these $1,000 bottles of scotch, or $4,000 bottles of cognac? Really and truly, the more exciting thing for me is always the things that I'm not supposed to have. The only impediment to me buying those scotches or cognacs is money. They're all available at the LCBO. I'm not ever supposed to have American bottling of Beefeater because I'm not in America. All right, so the question was the lemon rosemary syrup. All right, so for that, it will be the 500 grams of sugar, the 500 grams of water, 3 lemons. You'll just slice that. You're gonna put them all into the same Ziploc bag that we discussed. You're going to be putting in 1 good sprig of rosemary. Inside of this methodology, if you put too much rosemary, it will end up tasting like medicine and it won't be a pleasant flavor. All right. And that's it. You're going to put that inside of that Ziploc bag, seal it up, put it inside of a pot with lightly simmering water, and leave that alone for about half an hour. I would chill that inside of your fridge until it's cold. You're going to be able to extract a lot of really great flavors and a lot of the lemon oil, as well as the oil, incredibly flavorful and aromatic when you use it. All right. Cool. So we're going to ice this up. All right, and we're going to pass it back and forth between our glasses. A cocktail shaker, and I just had, let's say, 2 beer glasses. It would be the same process. All right. Cool. And to finish up, I like to put my aperitivo spritzes into glasses because I don't know, there's something innately Italian about that sort of aesthetic. And then I pour my liquor, my cocktail into the glass. And then we grab a little bit of soda. All right. Then I'll probably use a little bit of our dried orange. All right. So we have our wonderful gradient with our soda and our cocktail at the bottom. All right. When we're serving that to our guests, we're going to hit that with a straw and give them the instruction to give it a little stir before they drink it. Okay. So that is the Aperitivo Spritz. You could sub out, let's say, the Jägermeister for Campari. You could sub out the Jägermeister for Aperol. And in the case of the non-alcoholic, we can actually make we can actually make a non-alcoholic liqueur by using, let's say, Chinconia bark or gentian or mauby bark to create the bitterness that we're after. Or instead of using your club soda, we can use tonic water. All right, so that's still going to give us the refreshing bitterness. We will get, we should be able to create balance by having our citrus, which is lemon juice, and then we should have that right next to our syrup, our sweetener, which are lemon rosemary. We should end up with a very tasty cocktail, even if we were to completely remove the alcohol and put in some tonic water instead. All right. Yes, miss.
Kyle, could you also use bitters as well?
Yeah. So I haven't been using bitters in any of these cocktails, primarily because I wanted you guys to be able to make fun and exciting cocktails with a bare minimum of expense to you. But there's going to be one that is always going to come to the forefront. You should be able to get a bottle of this Angustura Bitters at the LCBO, at Fortina, honest to God, any grocery store probably. And the way that I want you guys to think about your bitters is that when you cook, there's things that you always put into your recipes. Salt, pepper, you know, for a lot of things that I make at home, it'll be thyme, rosemary, oregano. They're probably going to get used. Those are the bitters that we have on the front of the bar. The things that we have behind the bar, behind our head of the bar, those are going to be those spices and herbs that you're going to use much less often. For example, saffron. Saffron is not going to be used often, but if you try to make a paella without saffron, the entire thing will suffer. Very similarly, if you're going to be making, let's say, a pisco sour and you don't have chuncho, it'll be tasty, but it won't be entirely what it's supposed to be. So when you guys think about bitters, think about them as cocktail flavorings, very powerfully flavored, alcoholic, things that you can use in very small amounts to affect change on the overall flavor of your cocktail. All right. So if you were to put, let's say, a dash or two of Angustura Bitters into either one of the cocktails that we made, they shouldn't be making the cocktails worse. They should be making the cocktails just, you know, a little tastier, but not I wouldn't call either cocktails a failure without it.
Great. So they just enhance
The
then.
Yeah, the way I describe it, for some people, they're like, oh, I don't want you to put too much bitters in my cocktail. I'm like, dude, um, think about like the greatest steak of your life. Like the guy got a beautiful crust on both sides. It is absolutely deliciously medium rare throughout, but he left out the salt and the pepper. Like it'd be good, but it could be substantially better. All right. The I want to discuss is the sour, mezcal sour. Somebody asked about a recipe for a mezcal sour. A sour, the one that I'm assuming they're referring to when they talk about this, is a sour with an egg. All right. So if you guys remember the first recipe that we discussed, which was the classic sour, or as we refer to it at the bar, the square sour. Right, it is 2 ounces of our liquor or thereabouts, 1 ounce of an acidulant or thereabouts, and 1 ounce of a sweetener or thereabouts. To that, we would add the white of 1 egg. Right, so what that's going to give us is a frothy head and a deliciously viscous mouthfeel and texture. For that cocktail, I would most definitely suggest actually having the shaker tins, because it will be very difficult for you to create the head or the foam and properly break down your whites to make them really nice and fluffy without that. All right. For your egg whites, I like to use fresh eggs. So the ones that we use at the bar are, and I try never to have it there for more than a week. So we're always buying specifically for that week and no other time. Usually I'm buying 2 to 3 times for the week because I am, I don't know, I'm a worry wart. I'm always kind of scared of hurting people. So I just want to be able to have egg that I trust. So we deal with our wholesaler, and we try and get the freshest possible eggs. If you don't want to do that, and you're more than welcome to be even more of a stickler than I, you can use your cartoned pasteurized eggs. My only issue with that is that we end up losing out of touch on the height of the foam, and I would rather have the height on the foam and give people less of the egg and get a much better height on our foam by having the fresh egg. But do what makes you happy, do what you feel comfortable doing. If you're going to be using the one from the carton, it'll actually work out to just about 1 ounce of egg white. That's really as simple as that. So for the mezcal, generally for the mezcal sour, I will generally use half and half tequila. So 1 ounce of tequila, 1 ounce of mezcal, 1 ounce of lime juice, and then some sort of either a simple syrup or a lightly spiced syrup, like a cinnamon syrup. All right. Your egg white, you'll shake that hard without ice, and then with ice. and then you would strain that into your glass over fresh ice, and you should end up with a really nice little bit of foam on top. All right, I'll show you guys that one real quick, but you guys don't have to follow along with that too much if you don't feel comfortable.
And Kyle, one of our viewers, Eddie, has asked, do you prefer egg white or the Aquafaba for that, and why?
Ooh, that's a deep question.
Yeah.
Good question, buddy. All right, cool. So there's this thing at the bar where we joke about the idea that a person will like if you ask just the right series of questions while you're sitting at the bar, you'll probably get a whole bunch of free drinks because the bartender wants to talk about that crap. Right. So yes, Aquafaba. It is actually the liquid that comes off of canned chickpeas, and those crafty vegans figure out a way of whipping that into a multiplicity of different things. So the guys over at Rise Above, next door to us at the bar, I'm fairly certain that they use that in their sauce recipe to replicate the cheese on their pizzas. It is absolutely wondrous how much stuff that how much stuff you can actually use that for. If you're going to be using it in cocktails instead of your egg white of your Aquafaba, generally speaking, I will personally use loaves. And I will actually kind of suss out different Aquafabas that will have less salt in them, because they end up having a very pronounced salty flavor in your cocktails. A little bit of salt goes a long way, but to kind of put the amount of salt that is required for making chickpeas taste good is not the amount of salt that we want inside of our cocktail. All right. So if you're going to do that, the same steps apply. You want to shake it without ice, and then you want to shake it with ice. That extra step of shaking is going to break or is going to create that foam, and it's going to be a much better cocktail for it. All right. Excellent question. The only other thing that I would add to that is that there are other foaming agents that you can use. Fee Brothers have a foaming agent that we use behind the bar. You only need drops of the foaming agent to get the head that you're looking for. And that's how we make cocktails for our vegan guests. All right, but excellent question. That's awesome. All right. One of my absolute favorite. All right, cool. So we're gonna add in our tequila. All right, so we have everything in there. Let's seal up. I'm gonna shake it without the ice. All right, and I don't know. You know what? I'm not gonna pour cocktail all over the computer. I think that's a terrible idea. But you can kind of see the white and frothy nature of the liquid. All right, so we're gonna add in our ice. I like to use less ice than you might think is absolutely necessary. What that's going to do is going to leave a lot of room for us to shake it and shake it hard. It's going to make leave a lot of room for our egg whites to foam up and become extra dense and sexy. All right, and we're going to do this in kind of the classical New York methodology of doing a sour, so it's going to be on the rocks. You can do it both on the rocks or in a coupe. There are pros and cons to both methodologies. Sometimes when I do one with a coupe, it is because I want it to look very pretty and I like the glass. And then other times it is about somebody's usually bruised ego as to drinking out of a coupe, and they don't feel particularly manly drinking out of a coupe. I don't know what that's about. There's also the classical New York sour, which must be served on the rocks and must be served. It must be served in a rocks glass. Okay. So the way particular thing is I say to all of my new bartenders, you got to shake it like it owes you money. It's more just something for them to remember what it is I said rather than anything that I would actually do or believe. I don't have that much money to lend out anyway. Okay. Oh yeah. All right. So the entire glass is filled up. Well, we seem to be getting quite a glare out the window, or you're not being able to see the gradient there. But we would garnish this either with drops of our Angustura Bitters, and we create some sort of little design on top of our cocktail. Or since we used lemons, we used juice, we could make a little bit of a callback to this being a tequila cocktail and use our lime wheel. And that's going to sit nicely on top of the head. So as the drink has some time to sit and settle, we will end up with a head that kind of leads, starts right here. We'll end up with cocktail underneath. It will be as absolutely delicious. All right. How am I doing for time, Miss?
So we're about 8:07. So we should probably wrap up soon. If you have maybe a couple other tips, Kyle, that you could offer the viewers, perhaps if they're starting to have their host bar, maybe what kind of liqueurs or liquors you would recommend they start off with. We did have that question that was submitted beforehand.
Okay, so have your gin, vodka, rum, tequila, and usually at least two varieties of whiskey, either Scotch bourbon or bourbon rye or Scotch rye. Those are the things that I would most definitely suggest to start. Every time that, and this is actually how the back bar at Sazerac was actually started and continues going to this day. is that every time that I go to the LCBO, I try and I buy something that is new and or exciting to me, or something that is a quintessential cocktail ingredient. Um, while it might not be immediately obvious to most people, like there's ingredients that if you have them, it kind of opens you up to being able to make many other cocktails, that you might be called upon to make. Um, for example, if you have either triple sec or Cointreau or dry curacao, all of those are orange liqueurs, and that opens you up to being able to make sidecars, margaritas, pegu clubs, and you only become a much more capable bartender if you have those things available to you. Colors in the palette, if you will. But those 6 to start. I would then, after that, have probably get Campari, probably get the triple sec, probably get the Fernet Branca, and pick a category that you want to know about, that you want to be able to personally expand, something that excites you and makes you interested in those cocktails that come up because of that. I have competed with rum more times than any other spirit, so I have kind of a soft Dadian, and because of that, I have an even more kind of personal connection to rum. Trinidad is one of the largest rum producing regions in the world, and a lot of those rums that you have had in your life, you may or may not know, are from Trinidad. So I collect from many different angles, and I think that is a great place to start at the very least. Every single bottle that we have behind the bar at Sazerac, we can either say that it's very important from a cocktail making standpoint, or it will be very important from a storytelling standpoint. I, at the very least, don't consider it to be my job to make you drunk. I should make you. I should make an experience that it's that is, and I think alcohol is a wonderful vehicle for that. It is not the be all and end all of the experience. It should be an experience that is informed by alcohol, but not imposed on by alcohol. It does get a little away from the original question, but this is what I believe anyway. The entirety of the world has some sort of alcoholic beverage, and most of those beverages were made independently of one another. You get an opportunity to see what it was that those people believed or wanted to do to create a specific flavor, a specific alcoholic beverage. It is one of the things that connects us all as people on the planet. It's very exciting to me that there is so much room for connection in the bottles of liquor that we have behind the bar at Sazerac. You get to be able to see that there's substantially more that connects us than separates us, and alcohol gets to be a great vehicle towards multiculturalism in that regard.
Absolutely. And great tips, Kyle. We have two more questions.
Excellent.
Eddie has asked, he has a bottle of maraschino liqueur that he's used to
Oh, buddy.
make Hemingways, and he's wondering what else he can use it for.
All right, cool. So that's exactly what we were talking about earlier when we have those bottles that are wonderful for more than just one cocktail. Bottles that if you have it, you become that much more devastating in your cocktail making. So Hemingway daiquiris, of course, but one of the most famous cocktails of all time and responsible for a great resurgence in the zeitgeist of the past 15, 20 years in cocktails is the last word. So that is gin, maraschino liqueur, green chartreuse, and lime juice. All right. That is the maraschino liqueur inside of that cocktail is an irreplaceable flavor. It is one of the most distinct things about that cocktail, and it's absolutely wonderful. Another cocktail that calls for that is the Aviation. So that is gin, maraschino, and lemon juice. If you were to just go online and look up maraschino liqueur, there will be more than a couple recipes that come up with that. Liquor.com is a wonderful resource for that. I would also point out to you the book, The Cocktail Codex. It was published, I think, 3 or 4 years ago by the people who are responsible for Death & Co., which is a wonderful New York City cocktail bar. More than a couple of cocktails that are famous the world over are from those guys. The Paper Plane, the Penicillin, those called cocktails now were at one point in time just cocktails made specifically at that one bar. And actually both of them were by one specific bartender. So take a look at liquor.com and Cocktail Codex, and you'll start to see kind of like, if I have these bottles that is offered to me, and if I have this one, maybe I don't buy the Benedictine, because that one comes up a lot less frequently, and I put my money towards let's say Amaro Nonino instead. That one comes up much more frequently. Both of them are excellent. Both of them are exciting, but one offers you more opportunity to make more cocktails, and one specialized. All right, and the next question, Miss. Sorry.
And Karen has asked if you could suggest a substitute for Coke to cut down on the sugar, but still get the same taste for a classic rum and Coke.
Oh, so this is actually an area that we've delved into quite a bit because of my wife's keto diet. So there are sugar substitutes. Some work substantially better than others. There's a really awesome mini documentary on Netflix. The Vox people, they have Sugar Explained. And it's a great place to start when we're talking about the various chemical compounds that we can use and why they might work or why they might not work. That's one methodology. You have to make your own cola syrup and use less those sugar substitutes. If we want to make our cocktail actually less sweet but still behave in a similar manner, we're going to start pushing towards perception in our cocktails. So the reason that, let's say, Captain Morgan or any other spice rum might feel sweeter or smell sweeter or taste sweeter or be perceived sweeter is that there is vanilla. I would remind you all of probably the first time you were baking and you smell the vanilla extract and you're like, oh, Granny, can I have some of the vanilla extract? It smells delicious and sweet. And she being, let's say, a little crafty, she'll let you taste it, and it's not sweet at all. Right? It's just one of those things that the aroma reminds you of sweet things. The flavor, when added with a little bit of sugar, reminds you of sweet things, but you're able to be a little bit more coy with how much actual sugar you put into it. So my suggestion, if you want to cut down the actual amount of sugar that you're having inside of those cocktails, put in, let's say, half the amount or 3/4 the amount of Coke that you would normally put in. Put 1 or 2 dashes of your own vanilla extract and put in a little grate a little bit of cinnamon over top. Right. And then a little bit of lime juice. Right. So the cinnamon and the aroma of the cinnamon and the aroma of the vanilla should remind you of sweet things. So you should feel that the cocktail is balanced, but it won't be actually all that sweet in terms of how much sugar's in there. We use this trick quite a bit at Sazerac. So vanilla will remind you of sweet things. Cinnamon will remind you of sweet things. Almond extract, the aroma of almonds, the aroma of oranges. Those are all things that remind us of sweet things and will kind of give us perceived balance, but in and of itself, it will not be a particularly sweet cocktail or have that much sugar. Right?
Great advice. So, thanks so much, Kyle, and thanks for your presentation this evening. The time has gone by so quickly, and I know I've learned a lot, and I'm sure all of the viewers have as well. So I would remind everybody that we did record our session this evening, and we will be sending out a recording to all of our registrants, and along with some of the recipes for some of the drinks that you've made, Kyle, and the simple syrup. So our viewers can watch for that.
Yeah, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to send them to us on Facebook, or you can message us at barsazerac.ca. The person who will be answering that will either be me or my wife. So it won't be a situation where you'll just be sending your questions off to the ether. It will be it will honestly be either me or my wife, and we'll answer it for you. You can also check us out at the Real Bar Sazers on Instagram and Bar Sazerac Hammond on Facebook. And once again, the person who will answer your questions will be me or my wife.
Thanks so much, Kyle. That is great. And what a wonderful evening. And congratulations again.
Yeah. To have done this presentation herself, but obviously she cannot. She's over at the hospital right now with our son, and he's a wonderful boy. We have 2 wonderful boys, and we couldn't be happier.
Wonderful. Well, that is great news. So, thanks to everyone for tuning in and watch for the recording. And if you have some time in your schedule, go visit the bar and go see Kyle and Jennifer. I know you'll have a really enjoyable time. So, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye, everyone.